The mountain was wrapped in smoke as if the sky itself had descended to touch the earth. Thunder rolled in long, trembling waves. Lightning flashed in jagged spears, tearing the darkness into blinding white. The ground shook beneath every step, and the air was thick with the scent of burning resin. From below, the people of Israel stood at a distance, their faces pale, their voices hushed to whispers. They had been told not to cross the boundary set around the mountain, for beyond it, the presence of the Lord burned like a consuming fire. Then, the sound. It was not the low rumble of thunder, nor the cry of any ram's horn they had ever heard. It was a voice, a single note that pierced the air and seemed to split the soul, rising and falling like the breath of creation itself. The people trembled. Even the elders turned their faces away. But one man was called forward, Moses. He stepped across the unseen line, his staff in hand, the mountain looming above him like a wall of fire. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, as though the earth itself resisted his approach. His heart pounded not only with fear, but with the strange certainty that he was walking into something that would change him forever. Halfway up the slope, the world fell silent. The roar of the wind stopped. The fire above seemed to hold still. And then he saw it. From the heart of the cloud stepped a figure unlike any man. His robe shimmered as though woven from threads of sunlight and shadow. The edges of the fabric moved with a life of their own, whispering against the air. His face, if it could be called that, was like polished bronze, and his eyes burned as living coals. When he spoke, it was not one voice, but many, like the sound of rushing waters and the chorus of unseen hosts. "I am the angel of the presence," he said, and each word seemed carved into the air. "I stand before the throne of the Most High, and I am sent to you." Moses fell to his knees. His mouth was dry, his hands trembling against the stone. He had faced Pharaoh, crossed seas, and led a people through wilderness, but nothing had prepared him for this. The angel extended his hand, and in it appeared a pair of tablets, not of stone, but of something Moses could not name. They gleamed with a light that did not come from sun or fire, and on them were markings that seemed to move and breathe. Lines of fire flowed like rivers, shaping words Moses did not yet understand. "These," the angel said, "are the tablets of heaven. Upon them is written the order of creation, the covenant of eternity, and the appointed times of all that will be." Moses reached out, and for an instant his fingers hovered over the surface. A wave of knowing passed through him, glimpses of the world's first morning of unseen realms where angels gathered, of feasts celebrated before the foundation of the earth. He saw patterns of years and days, cycles turning with perfect precision, and the rise and fall of nations marked before they were born. He drew back, his breath unsteady. "I am not worthy to hold this." The angel's gaze did not waver. "It is not given to you because you are worthy, but because you are chosen. What you see here will not be given to all. Some truths are for the people, others are for the prophet alone. You must carry both." Moses felt the weight of the words settle upon him like a mantle. One tablet for the people, the commandments they would hear and obey. The other, a record that stretched from the first light of creation to the day of final judgment, never to be read aloud to the crowd below. He took the tablets, and they were lighter than air, yet heavier than the world. Somewhere deep within, he knew this burden would follow him all his days. The angel stepped back into the cloud, and the fire closed around him. The wind returned in a sudden rush, and the mountain shook once more. Far below, the people saw only a faint outline moving through the haze, a lone figure descending with stone in his hands. They would never know what else he carried. And here the question presses not only upon Moses, but upon you. If you heard words no one else was permitted to hear, would you speak them? Or would you guard them in silence? The descent was slower than the climb. Every step Moses took away from the cloud seemed to pull at his soul, as though an unseen thread still tied him to the summit. The voices of the people reached him faintly at first, like echoes through water. Their faces, blurred by the heat rising from the ground, waited at the foot of the mountain, expectant and afraid. In his hands, the two tablets felt unchanged, yet not. The stone tablets carved with the 10 words were solid, heavy, real. But the other, he dared not even show it, was unlike anything made by human hands. Its surface still glimmered faintly beneath the folds of his robe, as if the light of the heavens clung to it. His mind reeled with what he had seen. The patterns of time that no mortal eye had ever traced. The rise of kingdoms like waves, their peaks already numbered before the sea began to move. Festivals not as the people knew them, but fixed in an unbroken rhythm, each date an echo of angelic worship. He had been shown the very heartbeat of creation, and now he had to return to a people who knew nothing of it. When he reached the boundary, where the elders waited, their eyes widened at the brightness upon his face. Some stepped back. None dared to ask what else he carried. They only saw the stone tablets, the ones meant for them. That night, as the camp settled and the fires burned low, Moses slipped away to the edge of the tents. The desert stretched out before him, silent but for the whisper of the wind. He unwrapped the second tablet. It pulsed faintly as if alive. The words upon it shifted not in chaos but in deliberate motion, like constellations drifting across the night sky, each star moving with purpose. He ran his fingers just above the surface, feeling the hum of something older than the earth. His thoughts turned to the voice of the angel. Some truths are for the people. Others are for the prophet alone. But how could he bear such knowledge? He remembered the fear in the people's eyes when the mountain shook, how they begged him to speak to God on their behalf so they would not die. If they could not bear the thunder, how could they bear the knowledge that their feasts were misaligned with heaven's? That time itself counted by their priests was a shadow of the true calendar written in the sky. Moses bowed his head. "O Lord," he whispered into the darkness, "why give this to me if I cannot speak it?" There was no answer, only the vast, star-filled silence of the desert night. Yet in that silence, he remembered the stories of Adam walking with God, of Enoch, taken without death, of Noah, given precise instructions to preserve life. Perhaps every prophet carried something the people were not ready to hear, and perhaps this was his. He wrapped the tablet once more, hiding it deep within his tent. But he knew hiding it would not silence its weight. It was not only a record, it was a mirror. In its light, he could see the unbroken line of his own life every moment leading to this night. Far away, the mountain still smoked the glow at its peak, a faint ember in the darkness. Somewhere beyond the fire and cloud, the angel of the presence stood in the throne room of God, even now watching, even now recording. Moses lay awake until the first light touched the horizon. He had been chosen to lead the people, but also to guard a secret that stretched from creation to eternity. A secret that would one day be hidden from the world, entirely buried in the sands of time until the appointed hour. He rose, stepping into the cool morning air. The camp stirred unaware. Today he would give them the words they could bear. The rest he would carry alone. And as the sun rose over the desert, another question settled in the heart of the story. A question that does not belong only to Moses. If the Lord entrusted you with a truth too great for your generation, would you keep it hidden until the time was right? Or would you risk everything to speak it? The year was about 160 BCE. The sun hung heavy over the Judean hills, its light spilling across stone terraces and dusty olive groves. From the ridges you could see the shimmer of the Dead Sea in the distance, and beyond it, the Moabite mountains fading into the haze. But this was no season of peace. The land was restless. Armies had marched here under banners no Israelite had ever seen. A century before, Persian, then Greek, and now under the Hasmoneans, Judea had clawed back a fragile independence. Yet that freedom came with its own fractures. The air was thick with argument. In the courtyards of the temple, Pharisees stood with their scrolls defending the oral traditions passed down through generations. Across from them, Sadducees clung to their authority over the sacrifices and the altar, insisting that the temple itself was the center of covenant life. And far from both, in the barren folds of the desert near the Dead Sea, a stranger people lived apart. Essenes wrapped in white linen, waiting for a kingdom not built by human hands. Each group claimed to serve the God of Abraham. Each believed the other was compromising the truth. It was in this climate, a nation fractured by theology and power, that the Book of Jubilees appeared, not as a quiet commentary, but as a voice declaring itself from heaven's throne. It claimed that an angel had dictated to Moses the true account of Genesis and Exodus inscribed on heavenly tablets. It named the cycles of time, the feasts of God, and the laws of purity with such precision that any deviation was not merely error, it was rebellion against the order of creation itself. For the Pharisees, it was too rigid. For the Sadducees, it threatened the temple's authority. But for the Essenes, it was the light they had been waiting for. Here at last was proof that the priests in Jerusalem had been wrong, that the calendar they followed had drifted from the one written in the heavens. In the cool, dim halls of their desert dwellings, Essene scribes copied the words of Jubilees by lamplight. They read of a 364-day year of Sabbaths and festivals, perfectly aligned with the rhythm of angels. They marked each day with ritual purity, convinced they were the last faithful remnant in a world gone astray. It was not just law to them, it was prophecy. But prophecy is dangerous when it challenges the powerful. And the Book of Jubilees did more than challenge it accused. By its measure, the sacrifices in the temple were offered on the wrong days. The feasts, as kept in Jerusalem, were out of step with the covenant. To accept the book was to admit that the heart of the nation's worship was flawed. Perhaps that is why it was not simply set aside. It was buried, hidden. And here another scripture comes to mind, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end." Daniel 12:4. Was the removal of Jubilees an act of human politics, or was it a sealing decreed by God himself for a generation yet to come? The answer lies buried in the sands and in the silence that followed. Who decided that these words should be hidden, men seeking unity, or the Lord guarding a truth until its appointed hour? The desert was their refuge. Far from the marble courts of Jerusalem, the Essenes built a life in the barren places, their white garments catching the sun like fragments of cloud against the ochre hills. They rose before dawn to immerse themselves in water drawn from hidden springs, praying toward the rising light. Every action, every word was measured against their understanding of the law. It was here in these isolated communities near the Dead Sea that the Book of Jubilees found its most devoted guardians. They called themselves Sons of Light, and to them, Jubilees was not an optional scroll, it was the map of creation's order. On quiet nights, scribes sat cross-legged before low tables, clay lamps flickering at their elbows. Their reed pens moved in steady strokes, copying the words line by line, the 6 days of creation, measured with precision, the Sabbath as the heartbeat of the cosmos, the feasts fixed in place like stars. The calendar was not simply a way to mark time, it was the covenant itself, a mirror of the heavenly realm. They read how the angel of the presence had shown Moses not only the law, but the chronology of all history. They saw in its pages a pattern of Jubilees' 49-year cycles that stretched from Eden to the age to come. To break from that rhythm was in their eyes to step out of harmony with the angels themselves. And so they judged the priests in Jerusalem as apostates. The temple's feasts tied to the sighting of the moon drifted each year. Passover would come early or late, but never in the same perfect sequence the Essenes believed was written in heaven. To them, this was no small error. It was corruption at the heart of worship. The Book of Jubilees gave them language for their protest. It named the true calendar. It condemned compromise. It spoke with the voice of an angel, not a rabbi or a scribe, and that made its authority unshakable in their minds. But such certainty came at a cost. In the marketplaces of Jerusalem, Essenes were absent. At the pilgrim feasts, they did not appear. Their separation grew not only from the Gentiles, but from their own people. The scroll they cherished was becoming a line drawn in the sand, a declaration that they alone walked in step with heaven. Some say this is why they hid it. They must have known that the day would come when armies would march through Judea again, when scrolls would be burned, and their way of life scattered like dust. To preserve the words, they sealed them in clay jars and placed them deep in the caves of Qumran, where the wind howled like a distant sea. There, the scrolls slept for nearly 2,000 years. And in their absence, the debate was forgotten. The temple fell. The Essenes vanished. The calendar of heaven was replaced by the reckoning of men. Yet the words of Jubilees still ask their question across the centuries. If the pattern of time is written in heaven, who has the right to change it? The smoke on Sinai curled like living things folding in upon itself and stretching toward the sky. The people stood far below, their eyes fixed on the peak where Moses had vanished into the fire. Hours passed, then days. The murmurs in the camp grew into uneasy questions. Would he return? Could anyone survive such a place? Above, in the silence that lay beyond thunder, Moses stood before the angel of the presence once more. This time the air was still heavy with the scent of something beyond earth. The angel's form glowed not with the flare of flame, but with a steady, unearthly light, as though every star in the heavens had gathered within his being. In his hands were 2 sets of tablets. The first Moses recognized, stone carved with letters that burned, but did not consume. These were the 10 words meant for the people, a covenant they could hear and obey. But the second set was unlike anything he had ever seen. They were not stone nor metal, nor anything the earth had yielded. Their surface shimmered like glass filled with fire, and the writing upon them was alive. Each character shifted in a dance of light, forming patterns that seemed to hum with music he could feel in his bones. These, the angel said, are the heavenly tablets. Upon them is inscribed the order of creation, the appointed times, the covenant that endures beyond the world's end. Moses reached out, and the moment his hands touched the edges, a rush of vision filled him. He saw the first dawn when light broke the silence of nothingness. He saw rivers carving the land stars spun into their courses, angels gathered in worship at the close of the first Sabbath. The visions turned, and he beheld the cycles of time, jubilees of 49 years each, a chapter in a book only heaven could read. He saw nations rise and fall in precise sequence, feasts kept in harmony with the pulse of the stars, the Messiah's footsteps already marked upon the path of history. He drew back his breath, shaking. Why show me this if I cannot tell them? Because the angel's voice deepened. Some things must be kept until their appointed time. One set you will give to the people. The other you will guard until the day when it is revealed again. Moses felt the weight of both sets in his hands. The stone was heavy but familiar. The heavenly tablets, they seemed to weigh nothing, yet pressed upon him like the whole of creation. He thought of the camp below, their fears, their quarrels, their hunger for signs. How could they bear to know that their days were not aligned with heaven's? That the feasts they would one day keep could drift from the very rhythm of angels? The angel stepped closer, his eyes burning like twin suns. You will descend with both, but only one will they see. The other will be hidden as the Most High has decreed. For a long moment, Moses stood between the fire and the silence caught between obedience and the ache to speak. Finally, he nodded. Let it be, as you have said. And with that, the angel withdrew into the brilliance from which he came. The mountain roared once more, the wind surged, and Moses began his descent, 2 covenants in his hands, one for earth, one for heaven. If you were given 2 messages, one for all to hear and one that could change the world, but must remain hidden, could you carry both without letting the secret escape your lips? The path down from Sinai was steep, carved by centuries of wind and rain into jagged steps of stone. Moses moved slowly, each stride deliberate. The roar of the mountain faded behind him, replaced by the dry hiss of wind sweeping across the ridges. Yet in his heart, the echo of the angel's voice lingered heavy as the weight in his arms. The stone tablets, solid visible, pressed against one side. The other, hidden beneath the folds of his robe, felt almost weightless, and yet it was the heavenly tablets that made his hands tremble. They seemed to radiate a subtle warmth, as if the words themselves were alive, breathing in rhythm with the pulse of creation. With each step downward, the vision returned in flashes, the spiral of the galaxies, the rising and falling of kingdoms, the feasts of the Lord kept in unbroken harmony by the hosts of heaven. And always at the center of it all, the fixed rhythm of the Jubilees marking time as a heartbeat marks life. Moses knew the people would ask what he had seen. They would press him for every word, every detail. But how could he speak of this second covenant? They had struggled even to hear the 10 words from the smoke. At the sound of God's voice, they had begged him to stand between them and the Almighty. If they feared the thunder, how could they bear the truth that their reckoning of time might not match the Creator's? The camp came into view at last, thousands of tents scattered like pebbles across the plain. Fires smoldered, sending thin threads of smoke into the air. He could see the elders gathered near the foot of the mountain waiting. As he drew nearer, their eyes fixed on his face and whispers stirred among them. The light that clung to him was not from the sun. It was the reflection of what he had stood before, the glow of the presence still upon his skin. Some stepped back, a few bowed, but none saw the hidden tablet. That night when the camp slept, Moses withdrew to the edge of the plain. The stars spread across the sky like a vast script only heaven could read. He unwrapped the second tablet and held it up to the starlight. The letters on its surface shifted, aligning with constellations above, as if the very heavens were the key to its meaning. He thought of Adam walking with God in the cool of the day, of Noah given a pattern to save life from the flood, of Abraham shown the stars and told to count them. And now he too had been shown something immeasurable, yet commanded to guard it in silence. A prayer formed on his lips. Lord, let me be faithful with what I cannot speak. The wind moved through the camp like a whisper, stirring the edges of his robe. Somewhere in the darkness, the angel of the presence was recording still every act, every word, every heartbeat of a people not yet ready for the fullness of the truth. Moses wrapped the tablet once more. In the days ahead, he would stand before Israel and deliver the covenant they could bear. But in his heart, he would carry the covenant they could not yet know. And you. If heaven entrusted you with a truth that would shake the foundations of everything your people believed, would you hold it until the appointed time, or speak no matter the cost? The memory of the angel's form did not fade with the passing days. It remained etched in Moses' mind, as vivid as the fire on the mountain, an image both beautiful and terrible. Not a figure of flesh and bone, yet more real than any man he had ever met. His robe was woven of something like light, but deeper, as though each thread contained the dawn of creation. The edges shimmered in colors no human tongue could name. His eyes were like molten bronze at the heart of a furnace, piercing, unblinking, holding the weight of eternity in a single glance. And when he spoke, it was as though 1,000 voices moved in unison, the crash of ocean waves, the whisper of leaves, the roar of wind through cedar forests. The sound filled every space, yet seemed to speak directly into Moses' soul. In that presence, Moses felt both small and seen. Every thought he had ever held, every fear, every doubt, every hidden desire was laid bare without a word. It was the kind of knowing that stripped away all pretenses, leaving nothing but truth between them. The angel spoke of the order of heaven. 4 ranks stood before the throne of the Most High. First, the angels of the presence, who never turned their gaze from God's glory. They were as pillars of fire, bearing the light of his face to wherever he sent them. It was from among them that this messenger had come. Second, the angels of sanctification, keepers of holy places, who ensured no impurity entered the courts of heaven. Third, the angels of nature appointed over the winds, the rains, the seasons, and the courses of the stars. Their work was silent, yet all creation moved at their command. And finally, the angels of human souls who walked unseen among the living, recording every act and every thought, their scrolls one day to be opened before the judge of all. Moses listened, his heart heavy with awe. He had seen glimpses of heaven's armies before fiery chariots, and visions, the shadow of the angel who struck Egypt's firstborn, but never this. This was not a momentary intervention in human history. This was the architecture of creation itself laid out before him, like the foundation stones of the earth. The angel warned him, to reveal all of this now would lead many astray. Some would worship the messengers rather than the one who sent them. Others would seek forbidden knowledge, twisting it for their own ends. These things are written in the heavenly tablets, and in the appointed time they will be known. Moses bowed his head, torn between the burden of silence and the wonder of what he had been shown. To carry the law was a task he understood, but to carry the inner workings of heaven's court, a map of the unseen, was a weight no man could share. He knew the people would never see the angel as he had. They would hear of commandments of laws to guide their steps. But the vision, the ranks of light, the order that held the universe together, this would remain his alone. And perhaps that was the greater test. Because to stand in the presence of such holiness is to be changed forever. And yet to walk again among those who have not seen it is to live between two worlds. If you had beheld the throne of God and the ranks of his angels, could you ever return to ordinary life and pretend it was enough? Night had fallen over the wilderness, but Moses could not sleep. He sat alone outside his tent, the camp quiet, save for the distant bleating of sheep and the faint crackle of dying fires. Above him the stars shone cold and bright, scattered like countless eyes across the black. And as he gazed upward, he remembered the angel's words, words that had lodged in his heart like a seal. Every act, every thought, every heartbeat is recorded. He could see them again in his mind, the angels of human souls. Their forms were not like the warriors of flame he had heard about in battle visions. They were cloaked in white, their faces calm, but unyielding eyes fixed on the scrolls they carried. Each scroll glowed faintly lines of light, flowing as they wrote not with ink, but with strokes of pure radiance. One angel had stood closer than the rest, his gaze resting on Moses. In that instant, Moses felt as though his entire life had been read aloud. Not just his deeds in Egypt, not just the miracles in the desert, but the thoughts he had never spoken, the doubts he had hidden even from himself. It was a strange mixture, fear and comfort. Fear because nothing was hidden. Comfort because he knew the one who read those records, judged with perfect justice. The angel of the presence had told him, "These records are kept on the heavenly tablets. On the day appointed, they will be opened before the judge of all flesh. Then every man will see what was written of him." Moses thought of the people sleeping in their tents. He thought of the golden calf they would one day build in his absence of the rebellions and the murmuring still to come. Their names were on those tablets, every choice already known. And so was his own, every failure, every faltering moment. The desert wind stirred, carrying with it the faint smell of the mountain smoke. Moses closed his eyes and wondered if the heavenly tablets would one day bear the record of this very night, him sitting in the dark, feeling the weight of a truth he could not yet speak. He found himself whispering into the night, "O Lord, write of me what you will, but let my name be found among those who are yours." The stars seemed to burn a little brighter as if in answer, and he understood then that the knowledge of being recorded was not meant to crush him, but to steady his steps. Each day, each word, each act mattered not only before men, but before heaven. Still, he knew the people were not ready for such a vision. They would fear the watchers as enemies, or else seek to bargain with them as if they were lesser gods. Better for now that the record keepers remained unseen, their scrolls hidden until the day of unveiling. Moses rose, brushing the dust from his robe. In the distance, the mountain loomed dark against the stars. Somewhere beyond sight, the angels still wrote. And the thought came to him with the certainty of sunrise. The same pen that recorded his failures would also write his obedience. If you knew that every breath you took was being written in eternity, how would it change the way you live tomorrow? The night sky over Jerusalem was clear, the silver crescent of a new moon hanging low above the temple courts. A priest in spotless white robes stood on the rooftop, eyes fixed on that fragile sliver of light. This was the signal, the moment to proclaim the beginning of a new month, to set the dates for the coming feasts. Below, Levites moved like shadows, preparing oil lamps and tuning their voices for the psalms of the evening sacrifice. To the worshippers gathered in the courts, it was a scene of perfect order. But far from the city, in a cave above the Dead Sea, Another scene unfolded, one that would have branded these priests as deceivers. In the flickering lamplight, a scribe of the Essenes leaned over a polished slab of stone, its surface etched with rows of numbers and signs. No moon guided him. Instead, he traced the steady rhythm of the sun's shadow on the cave wall, marking each quarter, each week, each season with unerring precision. To him, the moon was a liar, its shifting cycle a corruption of the order God had fixed in the beginning. The Book of Jubilees had spoken clearly. A year is 364 days divided into 4 perfect quarters, each of 13 weeks. No drift, no confusion, every feast aligned forever to the same day of the week, a mirror of what the angels kept in heaven. He whispered the words of Genesis 1:14. "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." In his mind, the lights were not rivals. The sun ruled the day, the moon ruled the night, but the calendar was fixed by the greater light, not the lesser. Meanwhile, in the temple, the priest was lifting his voice, declaring the new month. The sound carried across the city like a blessing. But in the cave, the Essene scribe heard only betrayal. Every wrong date, every misplaced feast was to him a fracture in the covenant. Jubilees had warned, they will forget the new moons and the seasons, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. And he believed that forgetting was already upon them. Imagine the chasm between these two worlds, both claiming to serve the same God, yet living by clocks that beat to different hearts. For the Essenes, the temple calendar was not just mistaken, it was defiled. If the heavenly tablets recorded the feasts on fixed days, then every deviation was an act of rebellion, no matter how pious it looked on the surface. Moses had heard something of this on Sinai. The angel of the presence had shown him the pattern of the years, the jubilees of sevens, the festivals as they were kept in heaven itself. Isaiah 66:23 echoed in his mind. "From one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord." But what if the Sabbath on earth no longer matched the Sabbath in heaven? What if the song of worship rising from the temple was out of tune with the chorus of angels? It was not merely a matter of astronomy. In the ancient world, whoever controlled the calendar controlled the covenant. The power to declare when Passover fell was the power to gather the nation, to dictate the rhythm of worship, to write the very heartbeat of Israel's faith. To challenge that was to challenge the authority of the high priest himself. And yet in those caves, the Essenes dared to keep their own time. They marked Passover days before the city did lit their lamps for Sabbath, while the temple still bustled with trade, fasted and feasted in a cycle they believed had been kept since creation. They claimed their prayers rose with the prayers of angels, perfectly timed, perfectly pure. But here is the question that will not leave us. If they were right, if their calendar truly reflected the heavenly tablets, then for more than 2,000 years, both Judaism and Christianity have been worshipping out of sync with heaven. And if the rhythm of heaven has been lost, how do we find our way back? The wind at Sinai carried dust like burning embers, stinging Moses' face as he climbed higher into the cloud. The firelight ahead was not the flicker of a campfire. It was alive, pulsing, as if the very air breathed with the presence of God. He knew he was not alone. From within the brilliance stepped a figure, neither entirely flame nor entirely flesh. The angel of the presence. His robe shimmered like molten gold, but his eyes held the weight of eternity. In his hands he carried a great tablet, vast and luminous, etched with lines of light that shifted as Moses looked upon them. Every mark seemed to move with the slow rhythm of the stars, as if the heavens themselves were writing before him. Moses' knees trembled. What is this?" His voice cracked in the roar of the wind. The angel's reply was not sound, but it filled him like a voice heard in the marrow. The tablets of heaven, the record of all time fixed before the foundations of the earth. He reached out a hand, hesitant, and the light poured over his fingers like water burning but not consuming. He saw the creation of the sun and moon, the first Sabbath, when angels and man together kept rest. He saw cycles of sevens, jubilees upon jubilees, each festival appointed to its exact day. Not a single date drifted. Not a single feast was misplaced. And then he saw something else. Shadows. Years where the pattern was broken. Feasts kept on wrong days. Generations drifting further from the rhythm of heaven even as they still called upon the name. His heart sank. Can this be changed? Can they be called back to your time? The angel's gaze was unyielding. Write what you see. Keep the order pure. For many will turn aside following their own reckoning. They will say it is for the sake of peace, but it will be to preserve their power. And the appointed times will be lost. Moses thought of the people waiting below their festivals, their joy. How could he tell them that one day their worship would fall out of harmony with heaven, that they would still be faithful in their eyes but out of step in God's? He felt the weight of Daniel 7:25. He shall intend to change times and law. Was this not what the angel was showing him, that someone would dare to rewrite the calendar of the Almighty? The vision shifted. He saw a council of men, centuries later, gathered in a dim chamber lit by oil lamps. Scrolls lay open on a long table. Their faces were grave, but their voices sharp. A single scroll lay apart from the rest, its script bright even in the shadow. Jubilees. Some pointed to it with contempt, others with unease. One man shook his head. It will divide us. It will confuse the people. Better that it be left unread. And with that, the scroll was rolled and set aside. Moses clenched the edge of the heavenly tablet. If they bury these words, will the pattern be lost forever? The angel's reply was like a low thunder. The pattern cannot be destroyed. It is written here. He lifted the glowing slab, but the knowledge can be hidden until the time appointed for it to be revealed again. The wind around them roared, and Moses felt the stone beneath his feet tremble. He knew he was being given not just law, but a warning, a prophecy sealed in light. When the angel vanished into the fire, Moses descended with 2 sets of knowledge, the commandments for the people, and the calendar of heaven for a time yet to come. And here is where we must pause and ask, if the council that buried Jubilees truly did so to protect unity, did they also silence the very heartbeat of God's appointed times? And if so, whose unity were they protecting, the people's or their own? The night vision came to Moses without warning. He had been alone in the tent of meeting, the fire on the altar burning low, when the air around him deepened into a silence so complete it felt alive. The veil between earth and heaven thinned and then parted. He stood on a vast plain of crystal stretching farther than the horizon. Above him, the sky was not black, but blazing with colors no human tongue could name. From the heart of that radiance, shapes began to emerge. Not men, not beasts, not any living thing he had ever seen. These were the angels' orders upon orders, ranks upon ranks, moving with the perfect symmetry of a great army, yet their steps were like a dance. First came the angels of the presence, whose faces reflected the light of the throne itself. Their gaze was steady, their bearing unshaken, as though they had never once turned their eyes from God since the moment of their creation. When they passed, Moses felt every hidden thing in him laid bare, every fear, every doubt, yet not with condemnation, but with a gravity that called him higher. Behind them were the angels of sanctification. They moved like living pillars of flame, each carrying a censer from which poured a fragrance richer than any incense on earth. Where they stepped, the plain beneath their feet glowed with a renewed brightness. Moses knew without being told that these were the keepers of holiness, the ones who cleansed the places where God's presence dwelt. Then came the angels of the order of nature. Their robes shimmered with the colors of oceans and forests, dawns and sunsets. One carried the wind in his hands. Another held the courses of the stars as if they were delicate threads. When they moved, Moses could hear the rustle of leaves, the crash of waves, the hum of rain. It was they who governed the times and seasons, who watched over the balance of earth as a scribe watches the ink on a sacred scroll. Last came the angels of human souls. They moved more slowly, each holding a scroll bound in light. Moses saw his own name in the hand of one of them, and beneath it every moment of his life, written as though it had already been completed. They did not look at him, yet he felt their awareness surround him like a tide. Here was no forgetting, no omission. Every act, every word, every thought was preserved, waiting for a day appointed. The angel of the presence. His guide spoke at last. These are the watchers appointed from the beginning. Heaven is not chaos. It is a kingdom ordered by the will of the Most High, and every order you see moves in harmony with the tablets of time. Moses' eyes were drawn upward. There, suspended above the crystal plain, was the great clock of heaven, a wheel within a wheel turning with a sound like rushing waters. Upon it every feast, every Sabbath, every Jubilee was marked in lines of light. As he watched, the wheel turned, and he saw gaps appear, moments where the earthly calendar fell out of alignment. The music of the angels faltered as though they were waiting for a cue that never came. His heart pounded. This is what will happen if the times are changed. The angel's voice was heavy. Yes. When men alter the appointed times, they break harmony with heaven. And the dissonance will spread from worship to law to the hearts of the people, until they no longer remember the rhythm of their own Creator. Moses felt the weight of Colossians 2:16-17 echo in him. These are a shadow of the things to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. Was this vision a shadow, or was it the very substance of the reality itself? And here is where you must ask yourself, if heaven truly keeps time and earth has fallen out of step, what is it that we have been calling worship all these centuries? The crystal plain darkened. From the far edge of the horizon, a shadow began to rise, not the soft dimming of sunset, but a heaviness as though the light itself recoiled. The harmony of angelic song faltered. Moses felt the air grow tense like the stillness before a storm. The angel of the presence stood beside him, his gaze fixed on the darkness. You are about to see what was and what will be again. From the shadow emerged figures, angels, yet not clothed in the light of their Creator. Their radiance was twisted, their movements restless. They no longer marched in the rhythm of the heavenly wheel, but surged forward in defiance, breaking formation. Moses felt a shudder in the ground beneath him. These, the angel said, are the watchers who abandoned their post. They were appointed to guard the earth and its people. But they saw the daughters of men, and their desire overcame their obedience. Moses' mind flashed to Genesis 6:2. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. But in the vision, it was not a vague memory, it was happening before his eyes. The rebellious angels descended toward the earth below, their light dimming further as they entered the shadow of the world. They took wives from among mankind, and from these unions came giants, men of terrifying stature, whose strength was a mockery of God's intended order. But when the flood came, the giants perished, and their spirits unbound from flesh roamed the earth as unclean beings. Moses could hear them whispers, snarls, laughter that chilled the soul. The angel named them plainly. These are the spirits of the Nephilim. You will know them in your day as demons. The vision shifted again. He saw Israel in future centuries plagued by these same spirits, oppressing, deceiving, twisting the truth. He saw them cast out by the Messiah with a word, and yet like smoke they returned to trouble other hearts. Moses turned to the angel. Why show me this? What has this to do with the tablets of heaven? The answer came like the tolling of a great bell. Because rebellion always begins with time and order. When the appointed times are broken, so too is the boundary between heaven and earth. The watchers fell when they abandoned their station. Mankind falls when it abandons the calendar of the Most High. Moses felt the truth press into him like fire. This was not merely history, it was a warning. If Israel turned from the appointed rhythm, they would open the door to the same chaos that had birthed giants and demons. Then the darkness split. From the throne's direction came a brilliance so fierce that even the rebellious host faltered. A voice thundered not loud in the way storms are loud, but loud in the way truth pierces the soul. Their place shall be no more in my presence. Chains of unyielding light fell upon the watchers, binding them. Moses saw them cast into an abyss, its mouth closing like a seal. The angel of the presence spoke softly now. These things are written on the heavenly tablets, not as stories, but as decrees. And the day will come when this judgment is completed. Moses' breath came unsteady. He thought of the people waiting at Sinai, of the years ahead, of how easily they might step out of time with heaven. The vision faded, and the desert night returned around him. But the question it left burned hotter than the campfire before his tent. If the breach between heaven and earth can begin with something as simple as moving a festival, how many breaches have already been made? The council hall was dim, its walls lined with oil lamps that sputtered in the stale air. Outside, the streets of the city lay silent under curfew, but here, behind heavy wooden doors, history was being rewritten. Scrolls lay in uneven stacks on a long cedar table. Some were familiar, the law, the prophets, the Psalms. Others were rarer, worn from much use, but never publicly read scrolls that carried whispers of visions, calendars, and angelic decrees. Among these lay the Book of Jubilees. The men gathered were not strangers to one another. They were priests, elders, and teachers of the law, men who had inherited both the burden and the authority of deciding what would be read in Israel's synagogues. But tonight, their task was more than classification. It was judgment. One of the younger elders, his robe freshly pressed, spoke first. This book claims to speak with the voice of an angel. If we allow it to stand beside the law of Moses, will it not undermine the law itself? An older priest replied, his voice like dry parchment. Or will it remind the people that Moses heard more than we have told them? A murmur rose around the table. The question was dangerous, not because it was false, but because it might be true. They all knew the Book of Jubilees demanded a 364-day calendar, condemning the temple's current reckoning as a corruption of God's time. If they affirmed it, they would declare themselves and their fathers before them out of harmony with heaven. One scribe leaned forward. We cannot fracture the unity of Israel over the counting of days. The law as it stands is sufficient for salvation. But another countered. Sufficient or incomplete. This scroll names the sins of the patriarchs, forbids marriage with outsiders in harsher terms than the Torah, and claims all such commands are eternal, etched on heavenly tablets. If it is true, then our current practices are rebellion. The silence that followed was heavy. It was not theology they feared most. It was the shift in power such an admission would cause. From the corner, a rabbi who had spoken little finally raised his head. Do you not see? If we accept this book, we will condemn not only the Sadducees, but also ourselves. The people will ask why we did not keep the true feasts. They will ask why the law was not given in full. And when they ask who decided such things, our names will be spoken. Moses' vision from centuries earlier seemed to echo in that room, hearing the harmony of heaven falter when the times were altered. But here the decision would not be made by angels. The debate stretched long into the night. Some argued the text lacked apostolic use. Others whispered that its detailed angelology bordered on dangerous fascination. Still others feared it would stir Essena sympathies, drawing the people towards sects that had abandoned the temple. At last the high priest spoke, his voice firm but tired. The Lord has entrusted the law to Israel as it stands. Let what is hidden remain hidden. This book will not be read in our assemblies. And so, with the scrape of reed pens on parchment, the Book of Jubilees was set aside, not burned, not denounced outright, but quietly excluded. Over time, exclusion became absence. Absence became forgetfulness, and forgetfulness became silence. But silence is never empty. It carries the echo of what is missing. And somewhere in the caves of Qumran, far from the council's reach, hands were already hiding copies in clay jars, sealing them for a generation yet unborn. The hall in Carthage was brighter than that ancient chamber in Jerusalem, yet the work was the same, choosing which voices would speak to generations and which would be silenced. It was the late 4th century. The Roman Empire had shifted its favor to Christianity, and bishops from across the provinces had gathered to settle the canon once and for all. Marble columns lined the room, and between them stood scribes with wax tablets ready to record the decisions that would ripple across the centuries. On the table before the bishops lay scrolls in Greek and Latin, their edges worn by countless readings. Some bore familiar titles: Genesis, the Gospels, Paul's letters, but others were strange to the untrained eye: the Shepherd of Hermas, the Apocalypse of Peter, and the Book of Jubilees. A deacon read aloud from the scroll, his voice carrying over the murmured prayers. "These are the divisions of time as written on the heavenly tablets." One bishop frowned. "This book speaks of angels as if they govern all things. Will not the unlearned be tempted to worship them?" Another countered, "Or will they see the order of heaven and fear the Lord more?" The debate that followed was sharper than in Jerusalem centuries earlier. Now the concern was not just Jewish unity, it was Christian orthodoxy under imperial eyes. The bishops knew that Emperor Theodosius expected them to deliver a canon that would bind the faith together, one book for one church. Divergent texts, no matter how ancient, threatened that unity. A North African bishop spoke with conviction. "It is not cited by the apostles. It offers no direct witness to Christ, and yet it binds us to the calendar of the Jews, to feasts and laws we have left behind in the new covenant." From the opposite side of the table, a scholar bishop from Alexandria leaned forward. "Do you not see that in removing it, we also remove the roots of our own faith? Jubilees tells of the Messiah's lineage with precision. It names the covenants in cycles that point to his coming. Are we to pretend such signs were never given?" The room fell still. In that stillness, each man weighed the same unspoken truth. If the Book of Jubilees was right about the heavenly calendar, then Easter itself might be on the wrong day. If it was right about angelic oversight, then much of the Church's current teaching ignored an entire order of creation. And if it was right about the eternal law written on heavenly tablets, then the authority of bishops and councils alike would stand beneath a higher, unalterable court. At last, the presiding bishop rose. His voice was measured, but each word fell with the weight of finality. "The faith is safeguarded not by multiplying mysteries, but by keeping what has been received. What is not proclaimed in the churches from the beginning shall not be proclaimed now. Let Jubilees remain outside the canon." The decision was recorded in neat lines on wax. The scroll was set aside, bundled with other rejected books. There was no fire, no dramatic curse, only the quiet certainty that with each passing year fewer hands would unroll its parchment. Yet as the bishops dispersed and the sun set over the African coast, somewhere far from marble halls and imperial courts, the sands of Qumran still hid their jars. And inside those jars, the Book of Jubilees waited silent, patient, untouched by decree. Because no council, however powerful, can erase what heaven has chosen to preserve. The desert wind was sharp that morning in 1947, carrying the scent of dust and salt from the Dead Sea. A young Bedouin shepherd scrambled over the limestone cliffs near Qumran, chasing the faint bleating of a lost goat. His eyes scanned the jagged rocks until they caught a shadow, an opening in the cliff face, half hidden by centuries of sand. He bent, picked up a stone and tossed it inside. The sound that came back was not the thud of rock on earth, but the sharp shatter of pottery. Curiosity overcame caution. He slipped into the narrow mouth of the cave, his hands tracing the cold stone as the light from outside quickly faded. When his eyes adjusted, he saw them tall clay jars, their lids still sealed with hardened pitch. Some were empty, but in one lay a bundle wrapped in linen, dry and fragile as autumn leaves. He carried it out into the sun. The cloth fell away to reveal scrolls, parchment covered in ancient Hebrew script. He could not read them, but he knew enough to sense their worth. What he did not know was that in his hands lay the first breach in a silence that had lasted nearly 2 millennia. When scholars unrolled the fragments months later, they found names they knew: Genesis, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, and names they did not expect. Among them, written with the same reverence as the law, was Sefer HaYovelim, the Book of Jubilees. 15 copies, not one hidden in a corner, but 15 more than most books of the prophets, more than Job, more than Judges. The realization struck the archaeologists like lightning to the community that once lived here. Jubilees was not an oddity. It was scripture. The caves yielded more clues, sectarian writings, calendars marked with meticulous cycles, prayers that called the sun and moon to witness covenant faithfulness. Everywhere the same conviction pulsed that God's true calendar was the solar year of 364 days and that the temple in Jerusalem had long since lost its rhythm with heaven. As the scrolls dried in conservation rooms, debates flared in seminar halls. Some scholars argued that the Essenes had been a fringe sect obsessed with purity and timekeeping. Others countered that their devotion might preserve a key to understanding the very world of Jesus, who lived in the shadow of their beliefs. And then came the more unsettling whispers, questions few dared voice in print. If the Book of Jubilees had remained in the Bible, would Christians today keep different feast days? Would the resurrection itself be celebrated on another date? Would the church's calendar, the rhythm of its worship, beat in time with the heavens instead of the moon? The desert had given back a voice, silenced by councils. But the voice spoke in riddles, cycles of sevens, angelic orders, heavenly tablets recording the deeds of men. For some, it was history. For others, prophecy. In lecture halls, under glass cases, in the sterile glow of study lamps, the words once hidden in clay began to speak again. And across the world, a question stirred, a question that had once unsettled priests in Jerusalem and bishops in Carthage. What if the truths they erased from the canon were never erased from heaven? Under the careful hands of scholars, the fragments of the Book of Jubilees began to take shape, lines of faded ink, joined like pieces of a divine puzzle. What emerged was not a commentary, but a proclamation. The voice that spoke in these scrolls did not belong to Moses or a prophet, but to an angel of the presence standing before the throne of God, declaring secrets written on heavenly tablets. The words were precise, almost mathematical. They divided history into cycles of 49 years, jubilees measuring every event from Adam to Abraham, from the flood to Sinai, as though the story of the world had been scripted before it began. The creation week aligned not only with human rest, but with the worship of angels. Feasts were not human remembrances, they were echoes of celebrations already taking place in heaven. Then came the challenge, sharp as a blade. Israel, it claimed, had abandoned the solar calendar of 364 days, the rhythm written into creation itself. The temple priests had chosen the moon, letting holy days drift. Every festival, every Sabbath observed on the wrong date was in the eyes of this book an act of disobedience. For the Essenes, these were not abstractions. Their community rules found alongside Jubilees set daily prayers to the rising and setting of the sun, calculated feasts so they never wavered from their heavenly counterparts. They believed they alone walked in harmony with the angels, while the rest of Israel staggered out of step. The implications are staggering. If Jubilees is right, then for 2,000 years both synagogue and church have kept time incorrectly. Passover, Pentecost, even the day we mark the resurrection, all out of sync with the calendar of heaven. And there was more. Jubilees named the orders of angels, those who stand in God's presence, those who guard sanctity, those who govern nature, and those who record every human life. It told of the watchers who fell of their offspring, whose spirits became demons after the flood, a detail that casts new light on the exorcisms in the Gospels. It spoke of Hebrew as the original tongue of creation, preserved through Noah and Abraham, lost at Babel, yet still the language in which God wrote his law. For modern readers, these claims are intoxicating and dangerous in equal measure. If true, they force us to reconsider not only how we keep time, but how we imagine the unseen realm. How we read Genesis, even how we understand Christ's mission in a world shaped by angelic and demonic histories. Scholars debated in journals and conferences. Was this the theology of a fringe sect or a window into the beliefs of early Judaism beliefs that shaped the background of the New Testament? The evidence from Qumran was clear to those who lived there. Jubilees was not a curiosity, it was law. But here is the question that still divides rooms. Was its exclusion from the canon an act of divine wisdom, sparing the faithful from dangerous fascination? Or was it a decision of human politics, protecting authority at the cost of truth? The scrolls from Qumran do not answer. They simply exist brittle but unbroken, a testimony that no decree not from temple, not from council can silence a word heaven intends to keep. And so, as the fragments rest under glass, their words preserved in digital archives and whispered among scholars, the challenge remains for every reader. If the heavenly tablets were unrolled before you, and your life was written there in perfect eternal time, would you want to know what it says? Thank you for walking with me through the dust of Qumran, across the trembling slopes of Sinai, and into the shadowed chambers where the Book of Jubilees still whispers. This has not been an ordinary story. It has been a journey into the margins of Scripture, where questions are sharper than answers, and the silence of history speaks louder than its records. I am grateful you stayed until the end. Your time here matters, because together we are not just learning history, we are recovering memory. I promise there is more to uncover. Fragments still lie in the deserts of forgotten archives, stories waiting for the breath of a reader to wake them again. And here in the weeks to come, we will search them out. Until then, may your days be aligned with the rhythm of heaven, may your nights be guarded by the angels of His presence, and may every step you take bring you closer to the truth written on the heavenly tablets. We will meet again soon. Until that day, peace to you.